Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority Board of Directors meeting. With that, I'll ask for a roll call.
Yes, Mike Jones,
Present.
Stacy Giomi, Mike Reynolds, Steve Reynolds, sorry, Steve Kim.
Here.
We have a quorum.
If I could ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. At this time, I'll ask, I don't see any public comment in person, but I'll ask if there's anyone on the phone lines for public comment?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
All right, well, with that, we'll move on to item 5, approval of the minutes for the November 8th, 2021 CTA board meeting. Is there any board member like any corrections or comments on the minutes?
No, I move to approve the meeting minutes as presented.
Can I get a, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would any board member like any individual item pulled from the consent agenda for the individual discussion? Hearing none, would any member of the public like any individual item pulled for discussion? Hearing none, if I can get a motion?
I move for approval of consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We'll move on to item 9, discussion and possible action regarding a sponsorship agreement between the CTA and Friends of the Nevada State Railroad Museum for the Great Western Steamer event, for event total of amount of $10,000. I think we have Mr. Moore on board with us to give us a presentation. Welcome, Todd. David?
Good evening.
Yeah, if I can just, Chair, if I may, set this up a little bit. So yes, we have Todd Moore on. He's trustee with the Friends of the Nevada State Railroad Museum, and I'm excited to bring this event forward to the board for your consideration as far as the CTA being a sponsor of this event next year. We've had some wonderful meetings, not only with Todd, but also the president of the current Friends of the Nevada State Railroad Museum organization, also Dan Thielen, who runs the Nevada State Railroad Museum as well. Deborah's been a part of the conversation, James, Lydia, myself. We're excited to bring this forward. And Todd, I'm not going to steal any of your thunder because I know you have a great presentation here that you're going to walk through for the board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Todd Moore.
Thank you. I just do have a question. How would you like to view the presentation?
If you will just use that PDF that I sent you, I think you have the privilege now to share your screen with us so we can see it. Because right now we just see you.
Okay.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do is I will get open. So bear with me one moment here. I'm having some technical difficulties. All of the board members have the slide deck in their board materials, correct?
That's correct, Todd. Yes.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to launch in. I've got all those matters committed to my memory, as you can well imagine. For the record, my name is Todd Moore. I'm the actually newly elected president of the Friends of the Nevada State Railroad Museum. And next year will mark the 150th anniversary of the completion of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, linking Virginia City and Carson City to Reno and the first transcontinental railroad. So it's a very important historical event, and it bears a moving celebration, which is what we have planned for July 1st through 4th of next year. What this means is that we will have about 10 operating steam locomotives from various organizations throughout the West. That's in addition to our 3 operating steam locomotives at the Railroad Museum. But really one of the highlights of the event is that we will be gathering all of the existing Virginia and Truckee locomotives except for one, which is in the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum. So that's a little bit too far for us to bring in. So we will be putting together the largest reunion of Virginia and Truckee locomotives since 1937. What we plan to do is to have the museum grounds transformed into a festival ground. So we will not have any on-site parking. All of our parking will be off-site. Instead of our parking lot, we'll have display space and vendor space. We plan to have a food court, a beer garden, live entertainment on a stage in addition to the railroad focus. But we'll also have anything steam powered on site. So that's steam cars, steam fire pumpers, everything from the age of steam will be there and represented. We are hoping to draw anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 attendees. That's our conservative estimate. And we're putting on our program in a way that it encourages multi-day visitation. We'd really like to see a lot of overnight visitors to Carson City. So we have 2 different kinds of equipment that will be visiting. There's standard gauge equipment. So that's the same track size as the railroad through Reno, as the restored Virginia and Truckee. So that's 4 feet, 8.5 inch gauge, standard gauge. But because the Railroad Museum has a 3rd rail, we can also run narrow gauge equipment. So that's 3 feet between the rails. That equipment is pretty hard to see. Most narrow gauge railroads are quite remote. So we think that having narrow gauge equipment come to a major area, or at least an area that's near some major metropolitan areas, will be a very big draw. And so we plan to offer rides behind narrow gauge equipment and standard gauge equipment on alternating days. So that will encourage people to stay for multiple days so that they can ride behind all of the visiting equipment and really have the full experience. Our budget for the event is $165,000. $98,000 of that is money that's required to move the visiting equipment to and from our site. I'm pleased to report that the Nevada Board of History and Museums has approved that funding. So that's in place. So the event's a definite go. We've also been pursuing a sponsorship program as well as grant funding. And we were recently awarded a grant from Travel Nevada for $5,000. It's a matching grant for our social media advertising campaign. And of course, we would love to have Visit Carson City work with us. Dave and his team have really been instrumental in helping us formulate the event and come up with our plan, especially our advertising plan. And so we would really welcome our partnership with Carson City and use this as yet one more event to help increase the profile of Carson City for our targeted visitors, which are nationwide rail fans. So these would be people from all the way from New York to California. We also have a large following throughout the West. So we will be targeting advertising in the Sacramento region, the Los Angeles region. There are, we think, a large number of visitors that we can get from those areas. And so we're very excited about this event. It'll be much larger than anything the Railroad Museum's ever had. So we've been planning it for about the last 12 months and really are ready to go into high gear and start implementing all of our plans.
Thank you. I think it's going to be an exciting event, just what we need, and especially with the VNT history here. And you probably mentioned, and if I missed it, Todd, I apologize. The remote parking, is there going to be shuttle or how's that going to work?
Yeah, so we will be shuttling in our guests from the lots adjacent to the DMV. So we've already worked with the state to have those lots available. We've not worked out all of the details of the shuttle, such as who will be the provider yet, but we'll be running a regular shuttle service between those lots and the entrance of the museum.
Great. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I guess they won't let you use the parking directly across the street in the vacant land that used to be the National Guard Armory. That seems like a perfect match.
I agree. It is a perfect match. We've run into some difficulty on that. They are going to allow us to use the area that's outside of the fence. But as of right now, we've not been successful in getting them to agree to open the fence so that we can park cars inside that area. But we are still working
I'm guessing that's a state lands issue, but I'll leave my opinion to myself.
on it.
Any other questions for
Yeah.
Todd?
Is there a difference? What's the difference between being a sponsor, David, versus issuing them a grant, or is there a difference?
So we don't have the ability, we don't do like sub-grants type situation. And this board before, probably over a year ago, had asked me to look at retooling how we deal with events and to put sponsorship agreements in place for events, especially something of this magnitude and size. So that's why you see this is following a similar situation with the Peter Stetina ride, the Battle Axe and Tracks event. So we're using sponsorship agreements. And in this case, this is a destination sponsorship agreement. So that will allow the Railroad Museum and the Friends of to potentially maybe get like a title or a presenting sponsor. So this is a destination sponsorship agreement that you guys have in front of you today. So it's different than like if we had the ability to sub-grant or have some sort of a granting program in place, but we don't have anything like that. Does that, okay, yeah, thank you, Steve.
Any other questions for Todd? If there aren't any other questions, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the sponsorship agreement CTA-SA-22-04 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Todd, thank you very much for spending some time with us today. I look forward to a great partnership, and I think it's going to be a wonderful event for the city and for train enthusiasts.
Thank you very much, and my apologies that I'm not there in person. Unfortunately, I live in the mountains, and if I were there, I'd probably not be able to get home tonight.
You're probably right. So we're glad you got here anyway, through the magic of TV. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Being familiar with these events and being familiar with these events in other places, you might be very conservative on your attendance projections. This could be a big thing. So anyway, best of success.
Thank you. And that's actually a concern of ours. One of the things that we are working on is developing what is our theoretical limit for the number of people that we can safely handle on the site and capping the number of ticket sales so that we don't have too many people for the event.
Well, hopefully that's a good problem that we have to figure out. Any other questions for Todd? All right, with that, we'll thank you again, Todd. We'll move on to item 10, discussion and possible action regarding CTA agency policies and procedures. I know Chris and David and Todd have put in a lot of hours working on this. This was on your to-do list, David. I'm glad to see it come to fruition. So,
Yeah,
I don't know who
no,
wants-
I'm excited that we're able to bring, these are new, you guys, so these don't exist for the CTA, and I'm only going to take credit for Chris's work. If you feel it's wonderful work, and if not, I had nothing to do with it. Chris was doing this on her own. No, Chris has done a great job here over the last 2-3 months, putting this together, and we brought Mr. Reese in to help us as well, and Carol, folks from the city, to make sure that we were tracking correctly in terms of putting these policies together, and if we were able to take, beg, borrow, steal, from pre-existing policies that the city has, we have done that. I know Chris has about 45 to 50 minutes of discussion to go through these policies, so I'm going to let Chris take it away. Now, just kidding. We're going to do just kind of a quick high-level overview, and then if there are any questions, we'll take them from that point forward. So thank you, Chris.
So David lied. It's not going to be 40 minutes. We're going for 5. So currently we have room tax policies and we have our employee policies. So these policies are for the rest of the business of the agency. I'm just going to hit the high level because you guys received this from David last week. So if you have any questions, just holler at me. We basically broke it down into we have the introduction and the definitions, but we broke it down into the organization, which kind of lines out our purpose, talks about what the board is built of and what their responsibilities are. Then we go to the organization chart and then employee responsibilities for each of the different major positions, the managers of the office. Then we go into public information. We have how we handle information requests and our transparencies, policies. And then we break it down for communication. We've got broken down into policies for external communication and internal communication, with social media and all these different things. Everything changes on the, fly pretty quickly. So Lydia and David worked with this policy to get everything together to keep it most current, but also, flexible so that when new technology comes up, we're ready. And then we have information technology, which basically we just follow the city's information technology because we're within their system. So we basically follow their rules. The next section is fiscal management. These policies and procedures are basically what we've done in the past with our accountants and such for the budget preparation and maintenance and things like that. Purchasing and contracts, we basically worked with Carol and kind of stole what the city does since we try to follow most of what they're doing anyway. Accounts payable and P cards, very similar to the cities with just a few other things that we do in-house. Petty cash, internal controls, inventory, and how we do our audit and financial statements, all listed within the fiscal management. Then the next section is travel, our policies and procedures on how we handle travel. And the last one is hosting. So when we're hosting motor coach groups or influencers or different things like that, we now have a policy of how we handle those things. So if you guys have any questions within those.
Board Member Giomi?
Yeah, my first, I mean, on the travel policy, unless I missed it, I don't see a reference to GSA rates. Isn't that something we'd want to include in there so that we're following GSA rates? Or
So this is Dave Peterson for the record. We did this based on being able to reimburse for the cost of the meal, the cost of the hotel for staff, so we don't have to get into the whole, because usually we stay, and just coming from the state, we stay at the host hotel, where there's a show, where there's a conference or a marketplace.
and sometimes it's above the GSA rate.
Almost
Well, all the
every time it's above
Okay.
the rate, and then there'd be a whole nother process we'd have to go through, like to not circumvent, not a bad word, but to make an exception to every single occurrence of that, which would be every time the staff
Yeah,
travels,
Okay.
Whether it's conference or trade show, marketplace.
It seems like we could still do GSA rate for meals and incidentals,
We could do that. Yeah, we could look at.
because otherwise there's not a
Separate.
limit on what
Mhm.
people can spend on meals and incidentals, and I think there should be.
Okay. Sure.
I mean, if basically it's meals, I guess.
Yeah, we could do that. We could have a GSA rate in place, separate from hosting, like when you're hosting the group, or if you're just talking about reimbursement for the employee
Yeah,
by themselves, we certainly could look at that.
I don't know. I guess I just want to make sure that we're not, I mean, when I worked for the city, I couldn't go out to dinner at Lowry's Steakhouse, for instance,
Mhm.
because it would be, and this doesn't really prevent that.
Mhm, mhm.
But then again, there might be an instance where, you're taking someone to dinner,
Yep.
on a FAM or on something, and
Yeah.
it's above the GSA rate. So it's not a hill to die on. So I guess I will just leave it as is.
Well,
Um,
and Stacy, if I could just add, the majority of the expenditures are going to involve FAM, so it's either media,
Right.
group tour, motor coach. It would be if you're at a conference versus trade shows, marketplaces, because usually with a trade show marketplace, you're either out with another group or we're hosting a group. So I think the majority of the cost for reimbursement for meals involves some other tourism partner for us. Unless it was just like maybe Lydia say, going to a marketing conference, in which case the only way we reimburse the meals we've covered in here is if they're outside and they're not provided for
Right,
during the
right. No, I
conference
saw that,
event,
yeah.
which again is
Limited,
rare.
yeah.
Might be like a breakfast, situation. So we went back and forth with this, and we did
Okay.
talk to the chair about this. I just didn't want to put us in that weird space, since the majority of what I've observed we reimburse for here is usually involving other people who are a part of the meal. And then, yes, with the hotels, we're always staying at places that
Right.
are over the GSA rate for that city.
No, based on your explanation, I'm fine with
But-
that.
That also saves you some money in transportation, though, staying in the host hotel, right?
Mike, say that again, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Say that again, Mike.
It also saves you some money staying in the host hotel with your transportation.
And you don't have the transportation, yeah. And Chris just reminded me as well that when we go through and we budget, we're actually budgeting every one of these shows as a part of what we present to you guys in May. So
Right.
we've already taken into consideration. So there's actually not the ability to, like you said, just go to the Lowry Steakhouse, every night because we've actually built a budget for each individual trade show, marketplace, and
Yeah.
conference, and that's what we do operate under.
The other comment I had is that typically, and I guess I'll throw this to both David and Todd. Typically, policies are not approved by a governing body like this. They're approved by the executive director. I guess I understand the first time out coming to us maybe for overall approval or blessing or something similar, but I guess I'd like to hear from both of you on your thoughts about future changes to this having to come back to this board. I don't know that it's necessary. I mean, it seems like it's a function of the executive director and the executive director's staff to manage the policies and not our boards.
I think we accounted for that.
Yeah.
Chris?
Chris, do you want to address? We did actually account for that, Stacy, because that's exactly what I
So I
did.
guess I missed that, is
Yeah.
what you're telling me, that I didn't read it as closely
No,
as
no, I
should
would
have.
never say you didn't properly prepare yourself for
clearly.
the meeting. No. We actually did allow for that in the introduction, the last two sentences.
You want to give me a page number?
Page 6. New or revised policies and procedures shall be drafted by the executive director. Approval of the amendments of the existing policies and procedures. We did say we would come back only if it was a new or there was some material amendment to the policy, but we could certainly.
Well, no, I'd be okay with that, but this is new or revised policies. We drafted with the executive director. Approval of a new or amendments of the existing policy and procedure.
I just wasn't sure how, I didn't want to limit the, the involvement of the board, but I'm happy, with this first set being approved, if I'm given the authority to make amendments to the
So you're
existing.
essentially saying approval, on the one hand, it says new or revised policies and procedure shall be drafted by the executive.
Drafted, like I would put them together and then,
Right,
yeah,
okay.
bring
Approval of a
under-
new or amendments of the existing policies and procedures can only, well, yeah. So no, it doesn't address it. I mean, what you're saying is everything has to come back to us.
Right.
Go ahead. Tom.
And that's a great question. Supervisor Giomi, this is Todd Reese, Deputy DA for the record. I do agree with you that the language that you're reading says that while the executive director will draft the policies, they have to be approved by the CTA board. We can certainly tweak that. As to your initial question, there are, in regard to Carson City itself, there are certain policies that are approved by the Board of Supervisors. That's typically, I think, the exception to the rule. And I would agree with you that for the most part, the city's internal operating procedures are drafted and approved by the city manager, and amendments then go through the city manager's office for approval as well, except if there's some issue with them or matter that needs to be addressed by the board.
So can we change that language to allow David to make changes or revisions to the policy without coming back to the board?
Can we do that, Todd?
Yeah, we certainly can.
Okay.
You know, it just depends on how you'd like to revise it. If there's, you know, if the board simply wants to, if the board simply wants to allow the executive director to revise the policies and manage the policies, then we can write it as such. If the board would prefer to have the executive director manage the policies and then provide an update on any changes to them, we can write it that way. Really, however the board would prefer.
I mean, I think I'd be happy with the authority resting with the executive director with a year-end summary of any changes to the policy that were made over the course of the year. I wouldn't mind adding some kind of just so overarching, and maybe this is covered well enough in there, Todd, but just something like ensuring that policies provide the highest level of transparency to the public and comply with federal and state laws and local ordinances. Just something like overarching like that, and unless maybe you don't think that's necessary. It's sort of a, I don't know, a statement on the framework that the executive director would have when creating policies.
I think that it's helpful to put that in writing. I would suggest that the policies have to, regardless, have to comply with
Of course.
state and federal
Yeah, I
law.
mean,
But I do think that saying that has its purpose.
which is lawyer speak for a nice way of saying that.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do it, but only because you brought it up. But I appreciate it. Yeah, so I mean, maybe we can, we don't have to bring it back. I mean, can we just sort of allow you to, you know, when we make a motion, allow you to strike the, well, do you want to take a second or two to try and come up with some language?
Sure, if you'd like to give me a little bit. If you wanted to postpone action on this item and go into the presentations, I might be able to have something written up by the end of the presentations.
Okay. Can I give you my scribble about the ensuring that policies provide the highest level of transparency?
Please do.
Okay.
So I guess we're moving on to 11.
Yes, Chair, we'll come back to this. Yeah, we'll come back to 10.
Uh, 11, non-action items, presentation only. David?
Thank you, Chair. So 11A is my Executive Director update. I have two things. As you all know, James will be leaving us, so his last day is this Thursday. He's taking on the new role of Community Relations Coordinator with the city, so certainly wish him all the success he can handle in that new role. And I want to personally thank him for helping to build an event strategy out for our organization, and then bringing us kind of back to the forefront of group and motor coach travel as well. So I appreciated him taking on that new role. Chris and I are going to be working on the job description and getting a recruitment out. We'll get that out right after the holidays is the plan of attack. So that's just an update on the events and sales front. So we've been working for these past couple of weeks, transition meetings, and just trying to get everything squared up with what James was working on, and I'm taking some stuff on. Chris has taken some stuff on, and as has Lydia. So anyway,
So
wish James success.
chaining him to the desk wouldn't be in compliance with federal or state law, I suspect.
Well, we don't have a policy approved
Yeah,
yet,
I mean,
so
maybe if we,
we can do that.
Yeah, while we're changing things.
Exactly,
put that
yeah.
in.
And then my second update for everybody on the creative brand execution front. So we did complete our focus groups. So that was the qualitative phase of the research. We were reviewing the results of that late last week, and I know this has been tough with the timing of our meetings, but I'm happy to say it was interesting feedback. I will say that some good, some not so good on the concepts, but we are using that feedback from the focus group research to finalize our questionnaire that we're developing on phase 2, which is the quantitative front. So we're going to be in 11 markets. So those are our primary and secondary DMAs. We've also included the Reno DMA, Reno Verde DMA in there as well. That's going to be 1,100 completes on the quantitative side. So I'm very excited to see how that shakes out as far as the concepts are concerned. So that, with a little bit of luck, will be in the field by the end of this week. So I'm hoping that all goes well. So if there are any questions that the board has, happy to answer. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to 11B, the transient occupancy tax, actual versus forecast report. So that's the big 11 by 17 sheet that you have in your hands. October, I'm actually feeling a little better about our projection. I do feel we are going to beat the 1.851 million. We've got some stragglers coming in just with the timing of us putting the packet out. With postmarking and all that good stuff. Some returns came in after we posted the material. So I think we're going to be looking closer to about 1.9 million for the month of October. So I'm letting everything ride from November through June for right now, but I am happy to say that I think we're going to beat the projection for the month of October. So, and November, with a couple of returns that I have seen, were actually better than their October returns for a couple of the properties. So I was very surprised because I expected to see a drop coming in November as we projected. So, but again, 2 doesn't make a full sample set, right, against all 23 properties. So that's my quick update on the lodging tax front. So any questions on that report? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to 11C. So our next meeting will be right here in this room, January 10th, Monday at 4 p.m. So with that, I think, Mike, Chair Jones, I'll let you come back to agenda item number 10.
Right, I don't know if we've given Todd enough time to
Not
write
quite enough time.
Okay.
So
Well, what-
if you'd like to give me 5 minutes, I can probably have something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we could take a short break. Otherwise,
Yeah,
if you'd like,
we'll take a 5-minute break, even take 6, Todd.
Oh, my God.
okay.
All right.
Thank you, Chair.
So we'll be recessed for the next few minutes. discussion and possible action regarding the CTA agency policies and procedures. Are there been some language changes? Does someone like to take a shot at a motion?
Well, hang on. Let me read the language changes to you first, and then if you agree, you can simply move to
Approve.
adopt the policies with the language that I read.
Mm-hmm.
So, per your direction, I've on the introduction page of the policies, I've changed essentially the last 3 lines, starting with amendments to these policies and procedures are subject to change and modification. So the new paragraph there would read, the executive director may manage or amend these policies and may also implement new internal operating policies. The executive director may seek input on these policies from the CTA board. The executive director must present an annual report of the amendments made to these policies and the implementation of any new policies to the CTA board. The executive director must ensure that the policies provide the highest level of transparency to the public and to Carson City, and that the policies comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws.
I think that covers everything that was requested.
Yeah,
Um,
I will, with that, I will move to approve the CTA policies and procedures as presented with the changes read into the record by our district attorney.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. I think we'll move on to item 12, board comments.
Can I just make one comment? I just
Oh,
wanted to,
yes.
I just wanted to
I'm
thank
sorry.
Todd and Chris and David for doing those policies. I mean, no one goes, yay, policies. But they're, you know, in my mind, the backbone of ensuring that we are being transparent and that we're following laws and that we provide guidance to our employees. So my thanks to all 3 of you for working on those. I think they were well done.
Thank you, Stacy. And it wasn't free. Chris insisted that she have an extended weekend in Europe next year as a result of her work on those policies. So with that, I think that's a great
It's a
compromise.
good trade. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
good trade.
Absolutely.
To let her have a weekend that she would have anyway.
Well, it's an extended
You're such a
weekend.
nice
Yeah,
guy.
you know, leave Thursday night, come back Monday, you know.
No, Stacy's right. Thanks to everyone. Policies and procedures are usually a pretty dry and, difficult, tedious thing to write. So I appreciate all the time and effort. Any other comments? So we'll move on to 12. Any requests for information, board comments or announcements? Okay, we'll move on to item 13, public comment. I don't see any public comment here in person, but I'm sorry, David? Anyone on the phone line?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
All right. Possible action to adjourn. Can I get a motion?
So
So moved. We're adjourned.